This is our last talk for the day. Pretty excited about this. Learn about the latest investment trends in Gen AI. And we have a great panel of folks here to talk about that. So I want to just give everyone a quick chance to introduce yourself and maybe start with Ryan here.
Sure. Yeah, real quick. My name is Ryan Floyd. I'm the founder of a firm called Storm Ventures. We started 24 years ago, and we invest in B2B SaaS, which AI is a huge part of it today. Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
I'm Kristina Serafim. I'm one of the founders of Untethered Ventures. We invest in AI and emerging tech in healthcare and enterprise.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Owyang. I'm general partner at Blitzscaling Ventures. Have you guys heard of the book called Blitzscaling? A few. So it was a class at Stanford taught by Chris Ye, founding partner, and Reid Hoffman, which became a book called Blitzscaling, which became the firm. And I run the AI fund. Reid Hoffman is a LP, an advisor. He actually reviews all of our deals and reads my investment memos before we invest.
Hey everyone, I'm Divya, Sudhakar, a partner at a firm called Geodesic Capital. We're mid to late stage growth equity investors, so really Series B and after. We invest across the stack in B2B enterprise software, so obviously that includes AI, but invest in some other areas like consumer, healthcare, and fintech as well.
You all kind of touched upon this a little bit, but I'm just curious on the Gen AI side of things. What types of investments are you interested in or making? Is it more on the, say, model providers? Is it applications of Gen AI, enterprise uses, consumer? Just, yeah, maybe start with Kristina. Yeah.
Sure. So even though we just finished the healthcare panel, healthcare is our near-term area or industry of focus. Before Untethered, I was at Verizon Ventures for almost 8 years, where I was focusing on, started out with big data, then ML, big ML, and now AI, Gen AI. So I developed the investment thesis and led most of the deals that were done by the firm in that space. Currently at Untethered, even though healthcare is an enterprise, other enterprise industries are our focus areas. I think that where the applications are the long tail for investment opportunity, we still at our firm are focusing on enablers at the infrastructure layer, data management, data security, health of the data. Those are, I think, current near-term bigger investment opportunities in our investment thesis.
How about you, Jeremiah?
Hi, so I run a seed stage fund. So can't really invest in the $100 billion valued foundational models. It's not even going to be a 0.00001% ownership stake. So we're investing in primarily the AI app layer. And then my most recent investment is in AI agent company. You guys know what AI agents are? Raise your hand if you know what AI agent. Okay, the room does. So we're looking for companies that can quickly scale. It's called blitzscaling. So they rapidly scale. So specifically what we score them on, we have a scorecard, is do they have viral effects? Today's parlance would be product-led growth. And then secondly, do they have network effects, where as every new user or customer joins, the value increases for others. So marketplaces, social networks really fit well into that. This can be B2C as well as B2B. People immediately assume, oh, you're B2C. But there's been numerous B2B companies that have blitzscaled. Box, app exchanges, Slack, and Reid created LinkedIn, which is technically a B2B tool. So that's where I see the most growth right now. AI agents is a key category.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been looking across the stack, right? Everywhere from the semiconductor layer all the way to the application layer. I will say in terms of what we've actually invested in so far, it's been more on the infrastructure side. So whether that's developer tooling, data tooling, we have made a play on the not necessarily large language model side, maybe small language model side. Really utilizing open source models and kind of finding the best fit for your use case is what this company does. Happy to chat about it after if anyone's interested. But I feel like that's where we've kind of seen potential moats being built in terms of getting comfortable with the investment side of stuff. Obviously, on the application side, I think we're seeing rapid growth in a lot of these companies. The big question we've had is, do we feel comfortable that it's defensible? Just as there's, fields that are very crowded, like we recently looked at a company in the software coding space. So automating the software development life cycle. Obviously, you have things like GitHub Copilot on code completion, but a lot of companies are thinking broader. And so, while it's really interesting technology, and we're seeing that it's a good use case for this technology, and there's developer interest, the hard part has been getting comfortable that there's defensibility there, just given how many players are in the market. A lot of these require a ton of capital, and so that's been the challenge. And so I think, like, it's been easier to get comfortable maybe with some of the bets on the infrastructure side because there's more of a technical bet that you can make. But we're still looking across the stack because obviously there's going to be winners on all areas.
It's a good point, though. What I was mentioned earlier in the day, everyone, for the most part, has access to the same models. So both the startups and enterprises. So how do startups differentiate? To your point, like even the ideas I think of, or there's dozens of other people doing the same exact thing already. Like, how do startups go about differentiating in this environment? Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So we're investing at the application layer too. So we don't do much at the infrastructure side. It's a $230 million fund. So we have the same kind of challenge. And when we think about, I think what's interesting for startups today, it's companies that are rethinking workflows and rethinking processes. I think taking, I don't know, a traditional CRM application and adding AI to it, it's going to be hard for a startup to execute that, for all the obvious reasons. But if you can rethink the whole workflow, that's really where the opportunity is, because that's where I think incumbents will have a harder time really reinventing the whole application in terms of, because including the late stage companies in our portfolio, what everybody's doing is they're bolting on AI and trying to make their applications smarter. And that's a great strategy if you're an incumbent. And it's going to work fabulously well in a bunch of areas. But I don't know which ones, but I'm relatively sure there's going to be a bunch of other areas where people are going to rethink completely the workflow, and that's where startups are going to win.
I call that AI light. All the big enterprise companies down 101 with their billboards. It's called AI light. They just sprinkle a little bit of GPT. I'm AI now.
Oh, Kristina, you.
So similarly, I think we're all relatively, can I say, like small to mid-sized funds relative to the big VC firms. So we have to be really conscious to support startups that can um, commercialize their product or service in the near term. And if we think about, okay, where is the investment from their customer base? It's we see that currently it still very much is around the infrastructure, it's around security, it's around the enabling layer. So we look for two types of companies. One, does it have technical differentiation? There are companies, startups that have strong technical differentiation around, let's say, streaming data or data management. Like, look at well, okay, it's a large startup, but the tubular investment today, there are a lot of companies that are innovating in that, startups innovating in that space, that present an good investment opportunity, because they're not necessarily direct AI companies, but they are the necessary enabler to making the applications scale and work at a significant level later on. And then the other type of company that we look for is, do they have data access? Occasionally, like right now, we're evaluating a company that was a data broker, and so it had access to relevant data that they are now using as the baseline to create the AI application layer. With obviously, they had to renegotiate access to their data, but that's a significant uh, challenge for a lot of application AI startups that we see. They may have developed an application that's going to solve a significant problem, but they don't have the data access. So is there a unique differentiator with data access and high quality data that they can use to train the models in order to develop applications that large customers will adopt, as opposed to those large enterprise customers just developing those applications internally.
Do you have any concern with the model providers? Like OpenAI launches new features all the time, and you think each time they launch one, you're like, oh, geez, that's probably a whole wave of startups that are kind of, put out of business. Like, how does that factor in? To, especially if you're talking about application layer. Yeah. Oh,
I,
yeah.
I think we all worry about that to some degree, right? And I think the way you have to ultimately get comfort, like, the point about workflow was mentioned, where you have, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, that are releasing these general purpose models for certain industries, like being deeply embedded in that workflow, whether it's, post production in the entertainment industry, or I use the coding example already, but that's another example. Like, there are certain ways that people in those industries work that they need dedicated tooling. And so, can you provide tooling, services, et cetera, on top to really make them pick your solution versus more of a general purpose solution that then they need to, hire a bunch of people in their organization to actually make it function properly the way they need to? Requires a whole bunch of other work. And so, I think that's been an important factor in terms of evaluating these companies. Um, I mean, to your earlier question, I think the other thing that we really focus on in those cases is like team. Um, are you able to hire the right technical talent to understand where the ball is going? Because I think the scariest part about investing in this industry right now is that things are changing so rapidly, right? Whether it's new model architectures, and so you need a team that's going to be able to quickly adapt, understand where they need to move, to really be successful and compete with these large players like OpenAI. And so I think that's been important. Um,
Oh, this is great conversation. This is the stuff that we wrestle with all the time. So a couple comments. So we use the term exclusive data. 80% of the world's data is behind a firewall, so it's not yet trained on GPT. So we're looking for startups. Do they have a legal contract to that exclusive data? For example, if they have a legal contract to the 3 pharma companies that were up here in the last panel, this is like, okay, that's great. So that gives you a definite moat. As far as I can tell, and I do have friends at OpenAI, they're not going to enter the ERP space. They're going to rely on their providers or Microsoft to enter that. So it's unlikely that we'll see that. But Anthropic seems like they want that, a piece of that. All right, the second thing is we also have a founders bet. We have a scorecard just on founders, and we're looking for, so Chris Ye is thinking about this concept called an infinite learner. So it's somebody that can pivot really fast and learn new things. So that's actually one of the things we score on, because I don't think this market, I mean, guys, Gen AI market is only 18 months old. Shit. It's changed the world already. That's incredible. And so the last thing, and I can't say too much, but again, Reid Hoffman reviews our deals, so we have a really unfair advantage, I think, if you know what he does.
The previous startup, the investor introduced me to Reid Hoffman. It was one of the, obviously I met all you and, enjoyed all the interactions, but that was one of the more interesting, investors to get to meet with. Yeah, I really appreciated that. Actually, Divya, you started talking about the team a bit, which is interesting. How is generative AI, or the companies making use of generative AI, affecting team composition? Like, I saw something, a tweet, I forget who posted about, like, having $1 billion single founder startup. How is it changing the team? Do you need as many people, or what types of people do you need?
Yeah, just some stats. I think Perplexity has, I think, 70 employees, and they're in the billions already. OpenAI, I think, has 900 employees, valued at 100 billion.
Yeah.
So what's the value per employee? Like, and you look at Google. Is Google in the room? Okay, I'm gonna talk some shit. So they're like, there's 200,000 employees, 2 trillion, but they're already starting to be eaten away by these companies. So the AI first mindset, if you're from SF, you already know this, but to repeat, AI first mindset is you don't hire people, you use AI first. And if the AI doesn't exist, then you build the AI. Then if that doesn't work, then you hire somebody to build the AI so everybody else can use it. So
Would you invest in single founders doing Gen AI, or like, is the team? How does it affect the team evaluation?
gonna be probably a less popular opinion, but I actually don't think that Gen AI is a new market. I think it's a natural evolution of what we've been seeing starting, I was working on the big data side it's like 15 years ago, more as a product, on the product side, product management. And so I think that big data evolved into ML, evolved into big ML, and then AI, and then with open AI, now Gen AI became kind of a subsector. But I think it's just a natural, there's differences, obviously, the LLM usage and so on, but it's a natural evolution, meaning why that's important is it doesn't necessarily change uh, the criteria we use to evaluate a product or startup, whether it has uh, the growth prospect. And it's just, I feel like we're caught up a little bit in this hype at the moment, and it's already dying down. I think we're seeing that revenue in commercialization is not really following the big valuations and the hype we've been seeing in the last year and a half in this space. So I think that it really doesn't change a whole lot. The main thing is the company solving a big problem in a differentiated way, that in a big market, and do they have a defensible moat, or a way that they cannot be, their solution cannot be replicated. Obviously, having founders with experience in other tech companies matters, because they can more easily pivot, or they can more easily see what works, what doesn't. They can iterate faster. But that's been the case forever.
Yeah, I'll speak from the growth stage side. I do think a lot of people are talking about revenues matching valuation, but I'm still seeing a bunch of deals that are getting done that are, multiple billion-dollar valuations pre-revenue. So you're seeing a lot of investors thinking, that are growth stage investors that are acting more like seed stage investors, where if you talk to them, their bet is the team. And so they'll do very detailed profiles on employees, even beyond the like co-founders. So typically we are still seeing like, co-founders, not a single founder in a lot of these companies, but they'll look at the roster of like 40, 60 other people at the company to, make sure they're coming from places like DeepMind, et cetera, to kind of validate their bet. Now, I don't know if, that's the right way to be looking at it when you're underwriting to that valuation at a pre-revenue scale, but we're still seeing some rather nonsensical behavior in terms of evaluation right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. See this, it reminds me of the early internet days. There's all the excitement and new stuff coming out. So I can see what you're saying a bit about the hype part too.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to be a bit more we don't have that flexibility as some large multi-billion-dollar funds or growth stage investors do, to make some bets at that scale that will fail, that will just kill the fund. So we have to be a lot more disciplined about that, about the path and the revenue and the business model and where we are in the market. We just can't get caught up in the hype that much.
Sort of, it sounds like you were following a sort of the same process or evaluation that you've been doing with other firms. On that note, what are some of the things that you look for in say, a founding team? And maybe I can start with Ryan. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think it's true with everybody up here. I can't, maybe one out of every 20 companies now that we see doesn't have AI as a core part of their pitch. So you won't find a venture investors that's not doing AI. So yeah, the question of how you've really changed process, for us, nothing's really changed. We're typically looking for companies that have product market fit. So that's usually around $500,000 in ARR, something like that. Because what our North Star is go to market. That's what we know really well. And it's different than what Jeremiah does, because we're doing enterprise deals. It's not about virality. It's not about network effects. It's about figuring out an efficient go to market. And that's what we do. So we want to find companies where we can see that. And that's what we're evaluating, because we're not willing to bet that simply because AI is part of their product, they're going to be able to raise at some astronomical valuation without the metrics 18 months from now. And that's really what we have to be able to underwrite to. So we're still looking for those fundamental businesses, albeit those that are taking advantage of the current tech.
In one of the earlier talks, folks are talking about the IP and data rights, and actually, Kristina mentioned it, if the startups that have access to that, that could be the differentiator. Is there any concerns you all have with folks maybe making use of AI tools that generate some of the code behind the startup? Because as Barath was talking about, that could violate copyrights or IP. Is like, are those kinds of things that go into decisions or due diligence at all?
In terms of where the data is coming from, or
Either the data that they're using, or any of the rights, like copyrights, any of that kind of stuff too. Yeah.
I mean, it's a standard question, I'd say, as part of our due diligence now in terms of understanding that, right? Like we have startups say, I think like a common thing you'll hear most startups say is like, oh, we have a data advantage. Our customers are letting us use their data. But really digging into what that actually means, like a lot of companies are now getting savvier in terms of building it into their contracts. And so we're seeing some companies actually give their customers pricing advantages if they're able to use their data. And so we do try to review the contracts, just check legality of it. But I think that's top of mind for us just because given like the regulation and there are certain countries obviously where this is more of an issue, like across Europe, for instance. And so I'd say it's definitely part of our diligence.
Fair enough. So, are there any?
Sorry, just let me comment on copyright. I think copyright and IP is a big deal when we look at companies that we're thinking about, especially if they've got any bit that's like focused on the creative side. I just think most startups that aren't thinking about, and it's not because we're worried about legal jeopardy, really. We're thinking about it more from just an enterprise standpoint. I think as we look forward a year from now or 2 years from now, if you're selling a product, let's say it's a creative asset that you're building, it's a game studio or something, and you're building that, and you're using tools that don't enable you to preserve copyright, it's gonna be a non starter. And the reason that's important when you start is it's really the architecture and the whole arc of the whole business in terms of about how you think about building it. Do you really subscribe to this free for all open source, Dolly mid journey strategy, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great set of products, or is copyright important? So I think it depends a little bit on where companies are focused and what they're doing. And just to mention too, the data piece, maybe we can talk a little bit more about it. It's also probably the single most important thing when we think about differentiation for the companies that we're investing in, because we're not backing companies that are going to have a better model, like we already said, right? They're all taking advantage of the same APIs that are out there for everybody. So then is, well, how do you really build a moat? What do you do that's different than everybody else? And it's generally often access to the data. So like reviewing the contracts, thinking about in diligence, are customers willing to share that data, right? Do they, maybe it's under certain terms, maybe there's some anonymity to it, but they're willing to share that, because that could be a really important asset for a lot of companies. I mean, Reddit that just went public, it's amazing. They're monetizing their catalog. I mean, I'm shocked that that's actually a business, but it turns out that's a business, and most media companies are going to end up monetizing their catalog. So I think for startups, that's an important consideration early on too.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and that's why I said that a lot of the applications rely on data, and in lieu of that data, hence we have decided to focus on in the near term until the data issue gets resolved on companies that are enablers, that are maybe streaming data companies or interoperability companies or data management companies that can be plugged into the enterprise level, whether the customer, I mean, coming from Verizon, which also is, there's also enterprise companies that are restricted in how they can use their data. So even though they own the data, there's a lot of healthcare and telco, financial services. There are a lot of large industries that have restrictions. So even if startups want to or are on a path of I just find that extremely challenging and a long path to actually getting to viably use high quality data for Gen AI applications for a lot of startups. So give and it's not in every industry. In consumer, there's public data that can be used, but we don't focus on consumer. So on the enterprise side, it's just a lot more difficult, I think.
How about Jeremiah? If you focus a bit more on consumer, or you're looking at consumer, how does it?
We're B2B and B2C.
Oh, okay. Wait, do you see any difference on the consumer side, or?
They don't worry so much about copyright as my colleagues here on the panel are doing that. They're just moving as fast as they can. And many of them are monetizing synthetic data already, so it's already all mixed together. So it's not always the case where they have access to legal contracts with their data. You know, we're looking at other things too, right? So we have a scorecard. We're looking for the network effects. You know, does the value increase? We're looking at virality. Do you have partners, distribution channels? And exclusive data is one of those items, but it's not. It's not. It's like almost table stakes now. So our belief is that there's a war for the feature war is not enough. So you have to have the right business models. That's actually what we're looking for. We're a business model VC firm. We're not a technical VC firm.
Fair enough. One question with we talked a little bit about everyone having access to the similar models. We talked a little bit about the data rights and all. How are you helping your, say, current portfolio navigate some of the challenges with generative AI?
I'll just say, and maybe I should admit it. I think most of our companies that are focused on a particular area are smarter than we are at this point on AI in their domain. Like someone mentioned it. It's moving so fast. Um, it's almost impossible to be on exactly what the cutting edge and anticipate what's coming.
I help a lot of my portfolio companies with introductions to business clients and customers because I used to work in corporate. I was a forestry analyst, and my first two companies were focused on corporate as I was a founder. So I have those connections to a lot of CMOs, CTOs, CIOs. So I help them with that. And then they also get access to Chris, who wrote the book on Blitzscaling, how to scale. And then our founders get time with Reid Hoffman.
One more question for you all, and then maybe you can open up to see if the audience has some questions. What do you see in the future for generative AI? Like, what would you like to see, or what would you like to invest in? Maybe we can start at the end here, Divya. Yeah.
Yeah. So despite the fact that we've mostly done investments on the infrastructure side, I'm actually most excited about investments to come on the application side. And so I think I'm still waiting to see more of that aha moment in terms of, these applications solving something other than there's obviously a lot of companies that are doing well in like the marketing space, et cetera, but something that's much more mission critical, that could be revolutionary, whether that's in healthcare, um, industrial manufacturing, et cetera. I think there's, industries that are ripe for disruption there. And so um, I think to get to that point, obviously you require better model accuracy. And so we're not necessarily there yet. These are maybe more heavily regulated industries. And so there's some challenges with that. But I do think those will be applications where you can really build a moat and have a very large market that you can go after and build a big company. So I'm still looking for something more in that realm.
So the vision I have, and for some of these folks in the room who've seen me speak recently, is I believe the fundamentals of the internet are about to change. I don't think websites matter. I think websites are going to die. Instead, they should be dynamically generated based upon the user profile and the context. And I think that every website will just mainly have an API that'll feed an agent, and that agent will be doing the tasks on behalf of the consumer, whether it's B2B or B2C. It could be a business user. So I think the internet itself is about to be unwound and rebuilt in a different way, and I think Gen AI will be powering that. So that's the vision that we have.
How about Kristina?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with applications. That's what I started out saying is the long tail. It's just the question is how do we get there? And we see already some of the potential of some of these applications, but they're just as far as like the problems that they're striving to solve, but there's just a big gap both on the infrastructure security, model quality, data access. All of these things have not been figured out along the stack before we can get to scalable usage of those applications. But I do think that that's really where the future is just how you get there, and how do we as funds at this stage support some of these companies that can enable that.
Yeah, Jeremiah, that sounds like Web 4.
I thought we're skipping Web 4. Jack Dorsey's going to 5.
Web 5, yeah. I got a little bit more of a boring answer. For me, what's exciting is, I'm of the belief that software is going to continue to grow in terms of like market value. You all are probably aware there's a lot of investors that do not hold that belief. They think it's actually going to shrink, and we don't probably have time to get into that. But I actually think it's going to grow, and the reason it's going to grow, and what I'm excited about, is it takes over more service work. So if you think about the kind of a lot of the applications that are out there today, they're basically web UIs on top of like Excel or a database, right? And they do some very light workflow, and they're very useful. They've saved us a tremendous amount of time in terms of productivity, us as individuals. AI really has the potential to pull in a lot more service work into that entire workflow. And when it does that, it's going to increase tremendously in value. You can think about areas like finance, right? Or invoice processing, things like this. It's very menial data work today. A lot of it's done offshore, but it's tough stuff. All that should be done with AI over time. And so that service work, pulling that into the application layer, that's what we find most exciting.
Jeremiah, it's interesting you talk about the websites going away and the basically hyper personalization. Thought about this in the context of movies, like with Gen AI, if you can start to create your own movies. And I was at a dinner and someone else said the same thing, like, oh, I envision this world of personalized movies. And someone there brought up a good point, though, is then what do you have to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not even cost effective for many, many years, because there was a media AI thing on Sunday. It's just not it's not on the horizon for a while. It's too expensive. But yes.
Anyone have any questions for the panel?
Yes, great point. So the AI agents company that we just backed, the user doesn't have to go to a website anymore. So the AI agent goes and it does all the click pass through it and learns it, and it's teaching the other agents who serve other customers how to do that. So the user experience doesn't matter. Your website doesn't matter. Your marketing copy doesn't matter. So the flip on this is they're now that companies and brands and marketers have to do agent experience instead of user experience. So that's the flip that I was talking about, and that's why they will release an API. And since you're investing in the infrastructure, I haven't seen a company that has done that yet to offer that service. So I'm looking for that. I don't even know if we'd invest in that category, but I'm looking for it.
I mean, just to add on that, we don't think so much about like the user experience, like what a user sees on the screen, but I think I'd include it in the user experience. If you define it as the whole experience with the application and what onboarding looks like, it's so painful for so many applications out there, getting things connected and the data integration and all that. That is going to be table stakes, I think, for most AI applications going forward. Like you're going to have to do a better job to make it easy for users to get it up and running fast, right? So it's a little bit different than maybe what you're implying, but I think that's absolutely part of it, and I think it's an area AI can really help.
Hi, my name is Anand Bansode. I am a founder of 360 Explorer. So we are a marketplace platform for life transformational tours. We organize tourist adventure and life transformation tool all over the world. So right now we are in the process of adding Gen AI for tour recommendation based on personalization and then whatever setback they are having in their life. So, what are your thoughts on raising a seed round for other than uh, advanced areas where you use AI in medical and other technology? Let's say we are discussing about tourism. So, what are your thoughts on the companies who are using AI in tours or other than any traditional expert areas?
Feel like you're pitching me.
Yeah, you can consider that. I'll send you an email too.
I can kind of sense that. We're seeing a lot of companies doing things like this that are on self-help, personal content. I've seen startups. There's one that is trained off therapist data. So that's an example of what we talked about, exclusive data, and then it creates one as like a life AI avatar. I've seen some that are replicating famous wisdom people in the past and wise men and women. I've seen all kinds of permutations. I think it's a very crowded market. And I do think that in some ways, some of the foundational models are going to offer some of these things. So you need to think forward. Like, I mean, the OpenAI voices were so good that Scarlett Johansson got upset, but it had empathy. Like, really, they nailed it. Although obviously that voice has changed to a Southern gal now. But the point is, yeah, I think that's a crowded space.
Okay, thank you.